Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining today's webinar, Go Where the Kids Are, Find Success with Supper This School Year. So just some housekeeping to start off. All attendees have been muted, so we will not be able to hear you or anything going on in the background. However, you are welcome to ask questions at any time by submitting them in writing via the chat box in the questions section of the GoToWebinar menu. Unless something needs immediate clarification, we will address questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded, and we will send an email with a link to the slides and recording by the end of the week. Now that that's out of the way, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Carolyn Waite, and I'm the Senior Manager for No Kid Hungry's Center for Best Practices. Before I joined No Kid Hungry, I worked for a state agency administering the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and I've been with No Kid Hungry for 3 years now. My work here has focused on developing resources and providing technical assistance to promote the after-school meals component of the CACFP. In my time here, I've had the opportunity to talk with amazing partners, advocates, and school nutrition professionals from across the country who are doing great work to feed hungry kids. I'm joined today by 3 such champions, but before we get to them, I would like to thank our after-school meals partner, Tyson Foods. Tyson has supported our work on after-school meals for several years, first as we tested service models, and now as we continue to promote the program and best practices. We thank them for making this work possible. I'd also like to know a little bit more about you and your work on after-school meals, so we have a quick poll question for you. Please select the response option that best describes the organization you represent. So the question is, does your organization currently offer after-school meals through the CACFP At-Risk After-School Meals Program? And some options there based on how long you've been offering it, or if you do not currently offer but plan to start or don't have planned to start, or if you're one of our many partner organizations that supports schools and sponsors in offering this program. So we'll give you just another minute or so to answer this question. Looks like we've had about 2/3 of you vote. So we'll just give you another second before we close the polls. All right, and so we're gonna go ahead and close. Looks like voting is close to over. All right, so it looks like about 1/3 of you have offered suppers for more than 2 years. So that's great. We've got some real supper veterans on our call today. And about another 1/3 of you work for organizations that support sponsors and schools that offer after-school meals. And then the rest are organizations that have offered suppers for last time or have plans to start. So that's great. We're happy to have such a mix of people on the call today, and I think you're all going to learn something. So now I'm just going to quickly run through our agenda for the rest of today's webinar. I'm going to start by providing some background on No Kid Hungry's work on after-school meals. I'm not going to cover the basics of how the after-school meals program works. It seems like most of you don't need that information anyways, but if you are new to working on after-school meals, or if you're thinking about getting started, we have plenty of other resources that you can review after the webinar. After that background, I'm going to introduce our panelists and let each of them give you an overview of their organization and their work on after-school meals. After that, during the moderated Q&A, I'll dig in a little more and ask them for details about how they make their after-school meals programs work. Then we'll give you a chance to get your questions answered. Again, you can submit those questions at any time, and we'll address them during the audience Q&A portion of our webinar. And finally, we'll wrap up by highlighting some resources that can support your work. So for those of you who aren't familiar with No Kid Hungry, the No Kid Hungry campaign is ending childhood hunger in America by connecting kids with effective programs that provide the food they need. No Kid Hungry is a campaign of Share Our Strength, an organization working to end hunger and poverty in the U.S. and abroad. My team, specifically the Center for Best Practices, supports No Kid Hungry's work by providing technical assistance and developing case studies, reports, trainings, and more to help organizations that operate child nutrition programs, as well as assist educators, community leaders, elected officials, and policymakers who are working to end childhood hunger. We include after-school meals as part of our work because we know that kids and families are busy. So after-school meals can provide kids with good nutrition to power them through long afternoons and evenings, while also supporting the after-school programs, sponsors, and schools that serve them. We also know that 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. lives in a household struggling with hunger. So the after-school meals program is really crucial for those kids and families who don't have steady access to healthy food. Despite that need, in FY 2017, for every 20 free and reduced price school lunches served, there was less than 1 after-school supper served. So despite the amazing growth in this program since it was started, there is still a big gap. But we have learned a lot over the years, and we found 2 service models that work particularly well with schools. The first is the umbrella model, which we tested in middle and high schools. And the umbrella model refers to a supper program that is open and actively promoted to all students, not just students enrolled in specific after-school programs. So as long as the school has 1 or more activities open to all, any student, including athletes, can get an after-school meal. And we found that opening up the supper program can boost participation by over 50%. The second model is supper in the classroom, which we tested in elementary schools. The name says it all with this model, and we found that schools that allowed kids to eat in the classroom right after the bell could reach as many students as were eating lunch. Beyond these broad models, we've learned a lot about the specific practices that go into a successful after-school meals program, like timing the meal right at the bell and optimizing the logistics to reach as many busy students as possible in a short period of time, taking transportation into account when planning, promoting the meal with simple tactics like PA announcements, packaging and branding the meal to maximize appeal to students, and building partnerships that leverage other strengths so that we can do more and reach more kids. Overall, we found that there are many effective ways to structure the after-school meals program, and different approaches for various elements may work for you depending on your organization and the programs and kids that you serve. Our panelists today will discuss some of the specific tactics that they've used to make their program successful, and these practices all revolve around our title and theme for today, Go Where the Kids Are. So finally, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our panelists. The first will be Julia Engle, who is the registered dietitian with Chartwell's K-12 at Pike Township Schools, which is near Indianapolis in Indiana. And I'm excited for her to talk today about setting up a central serving area and delivering meals directly to activity groups. Next, we'll hear from Jim Faggione, Director of School Nutrition Services for Guilford County Schools in North Carolina. Jim has been implementing supper in the classroom in Guilford County elementary schools with the support of a nonprofit sponsoring organization. Jim's sponsor is Child Nutrition Program, Inc. So we are also joined by Vicki Lipscomb, President of Child Nutrition Program, Inc., which is also based in North Carolina. So with that, I will turn it over to Julia so that we can learn more about her work. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yes, I'm very glad to be here today and have this opportunity to speak on our suppers program because it benefits so many of our students here in Pike Township schools as it does across the country. So to get started, I like to first share some facts just about our school district in general. Pike Township schools includes a total of 14 schools. So we have 9 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, a freshman center, and a high school, which brings us to a total enrollment of just over 11,000 students in our district. Each of these 14 schools participates in our suppers program, and with that, our district is at about a 72% free and reduced percentage. So the majority of our students are participating in school breakfast and school lunch in this suppers program. And because so many of our students are on that free or reduced status, we have a really great opportunity to make a positive impact with these students and provide them with nutritious meals that, as you said, Carolyn, may not be always available to them at home. So if we take a look here at our next slide, we can see some photos of one of our schools in action during our suppers program. And as I mentioned earlier, each of our schools is participating in the suppers program, but in this slide, I've featured our high school, which has a rather unique opportunity to reach out to our students. And Carolyn, as you said, we notice a higher participation rate when we're able to go to the students and bring them meals rather than rely on them to come and find us. Because as we know, students are busy, They have their own after-school activities. Some of them have jobs. They may be catching a ride with their friends. So we found if we use this mobile concept you see here in these pictures, we can increase our participation. So the photos here are showing our mobile suppers cart, and we started by just putting coolers of milk and stacked meals on a flatbed cart. We push this cart around our school hallways where the students congregate after schools, and one of our associates will push the cart and serve the meals, while another one will be responsible for crowd control, completing daily meal count sheets. And with this, we're also noticing more teachers, more after-school organizations are learning about our program and beginning to request that we actually make a stop by their classroom each day. We know that the more visible we are to the students, the more that they're going to talk about our meal cart to their friends. So actually by the end of the year, we were noticing a long line of students were waiting for us just to open up our cafeteria doors and then, wait for us to begin our supper service. Again, you can see in these photos, we've started with just a very simple concept that really anybody can piece together. But of important note here is to make sure you remain compliant with your state program. So you can see in that top right-hand photo, we've placed our "And Justice for All" poster and a friendly reminder to make sure students are washing their hands as a part of a request from our state auditors. So I would recommend, if somebody were thinking about starting this mobile cart program, to reach out to your state contacts and make sure that you ask them what steps that you need to take to be compliant. Now, on our next slide here, you can see that we've put here more advanced versions of our mobile cart. So these carts here, we actually use these for our breakfast program because they do require electricity and they're not quite as mobile as we need to be for suppers. But I like to use these as an example of what mobile carts could be based on depending on your district's needs. So the carts you see here, they contain a cold well, they have a mini refrigerator for milk, they have heat lamps to keep food warm, and this design is lightweight, so our team can push it to a popular location where students like to congregate. Our original cart was just a little bit too heavy and it required 2 people, so if you ever are considering that mobile cart, I would encourage you to keep that lightweight as a big priority. But in closing here, I think that if anyone were to consider this mobile cart option for their suppers program, you can see it can be something as simple as a flatbed cart, or it can be a little more advanced like those you see here in these photos. But overall, the important message and our goal each and every day is just to continue to feed our students so they can reach their goals and achieve the success that they strive for in their schooling.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia. That was great. And now I am going to turn it over to Jim so we can learn about what's happening in Guilford County.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this today. And I'm happy to share some of the things that we've done over the last couple of years and some of our plans moving forward. And I'm going to dive into some logistics and just some behind-the-scenes type of partnerships that we've developed and how we got the ball rolling, what our partnerships have looked like, how they've grown, and let's just talk about the district as we get started here. As you can see, we're 126 schools broken down by those levels as you see right there, and then we're about 65% free and reduced. And as my colleague just mentioned a few minutes ago, with a percentage that high, obviously the need at breakfast and lunch is great, and we've done a good job to really address that. But what we noticed was exactly that slide that was shown earlier, is that there's just such a lack of support and resources for students after the bell. So we took a strategic approach over the last 6 years to say, let's do a great job and let's really focus on building our breakfast and lunch programs, and then let's get to the dinner program. So as we started to begin to think about what dinner was and how we were going to get dinner rolling, as you see there, that first one, obviously this goes without saying that partnership is the key to success. And what we really looked for were, when we started this and I use the term pilot, and I love to use that term pilot program. When we started with 2 schools, was find principals who were forward-thinking, who weren't afraid to take that challenge, who were friends of the school nutrition department, who would advocate for us, and who wouldn't be afraid to break the mold and take some leadership. And we found 2 schools that had principals that we just automatically were drawn to. They were fantastic champions because of the fact that, look, it's great for my team. We can add resources. We can, do what we need to do to prepare for that. But it's important for the principal to get the buy-in of his staff. He needs to convince teachers. He needs to convince custodians the benefits of this and what additional work or what additional changes to their daily schedule that might be an impact is going to be greatly outweighed by the benefits of what this program is supposed to do and is supposed to feed our kids. So why we picked those 2 schools also and why we expanded this way is they already had an established breakfast in the classroom program. We've had over 50 schools in our district that participate in breakfast in the classroom. So we already had a mechanism in place in terms of resources, infrastructure, and teachers were already accustomed to having a meal come to their classroom, using a roster, working with our cafeteria manager to verify that the roster matches up with the meals that were served. Basically additional like 35, point of sales. So since they had that inherent knowledge to add this program and the method of delivering the system was going to be the same, it just made that transition that much smoother. So we had the benefit of that. And again, we always hear, everybody loved it. There was concern at the beginning, obviously, about what this change would mean and how it was going to work. But we had a couple of principals who were willing to adapt their bell schedule, modify how they ended the day to give that time at the end of the day after the bell rang and have their teachers prepared with structured curriculum so that we could then serve this meal and be compliant. And again, the feedback has been tremendous. Awesome participation. When you bring it to the classroom, the participation has been tremendous. Teachers have reached out to us and have thanked us for what we've done for the community and for their kids. And obviously parents really overwhelmingly have been could not be more supportive of this. And other schools have asked and reached out because they hear what's going on and they want to be part of it as well. Next, if you go to the next slide. As I said, they were piloted in 2 elementary schools. We've expanded last year. We've got 10 schools on the docket for this year. And on top of the 10 schools, we also have some schools where we're doing some piloting with some individual tutorials. There'll be some we do things where there may be some tutorials that come up prior to end of the year testing, where there may be some Saturdays or maybe some evening tutorials that are established. So we have the flexibility, and that flexibility comes from that last bullet point there, which is that we are sponsored by Child Nutrition Program Inc., Vicki's organization and nonprofit. Why I mean flexibility is they have been tremendous, and all of our success is because of what they've been able to do to help us. As large as we are and the resources that we have at our disposal, it still came down to the simple matter of what we do well is that operational logistics, providing meals, networking, getting the systems in place, doing the training, things of that sort. What Vicki and her team do is they help us. They've really taken a partnership role with us in terms of helping us from a compliance standpoint, making sure that we're doing what's right, helping us get the documentation completed, working with us for self-audit, doing the on-site audits. So that's what they're pros at, and that's what they do well. So the first day I met Vicki, I always talk about this. I met her a few years ago, and it's been nothing but just awesomeness ever since, if that's the word, awesomeness. The relationship has been strong. My folks appreciate when they come to visit her folks because it's not a gotcha situation. It's a situation where they're there to help us, they're here to provide guidance and support, tell us what we're doing right, help us if we're not doing something that's not correct, and provide that leadership and that experience to support our folks in the field. And really gets them to focus on doing what they need to be doing, which is providing high quality meals to our kids who really need it. So again, I may be bloviating, but I cannot speak highly enough for Vicki and her team. They do noble work. They are a phone call away whenever I need them. And it's funny, I also asked her, I said, how big can we go? She says, we can go as big as you want to go, Jim. So we've got a long way to go. We're eager to continue this growth. We know now how to do it. We've created models of success on a small micro level, and we plan to expand that in the macro level. Our kids are counting on us. There's no excuse not to do it. There's the opportunity, the funding's there, we have the will and the resources, so it's just a matter of making it happen. Some of the things that we've come up with, there may be an additional staffing. If you don't have a breakfast in the classroom model, or if you don't have staffing in place, you may need either shift staff or add staff. That's certainly a consideration. It's not necessary. It depends on your business model and what you need to do. I will say this: the reimbursement that you get well offsets any added cost. If you put a meal together, you just use your business acumen and develop a menu that is not over the top. And make some sound, pragmatic decisions early on about what your investment is going to be in the resources to get this thing off the ground. I think that you can, safely say that you can get this thing rolling, and the reimbursement will cover it. We've gone with a 1-week menu. Some people might say that would be a little redundant, but our kids, we've gotten no negative feedback from that. We mix the menu up a third of the year. We're on 3 cycles, so we do add variety, but it is a 1-week cycle to help our staff be a little more efficient in how they order and how they prepare food. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, that on-site order from the sponsor, it is just from an integrity standpoint, from a learning standpoint, from a support standpoint, it cannot be. It's as helpful as it can possibly be, and it's just made us the success that we are, and made my folks better. So we're grateful for that. We can look for the continued relationship moving forward. And I think that's about it from me.
Yep. Thank you so much, Jim. That's a great overview, and always so great to hear about your work and your partnership with Vicki. And speaking of that, we will now turn it over to Vicki so that you can hear from her directly about her end of this partnership.
Hey, Carolyn, thank you, and thank you, Jim and Julia. You can go on and move to the next slide, possibly. Our organization was founded in 1982, so we've been doing this for 36 years, and we are exclusively CACFP. So we feel like we know CACFP inside out, and we've watched it change over the years. One of the things I think that is so interesting about the Child and Adult Care Food Program is our country is really like a big patchwork quilt, and every state is not the same. And our state, school lunch and CACFP are in 2 different departments, and that made the application process a lot more complicated for our school systems. Because we're already approved, have a plan, have a excellent audit history, we're able to add sites probably faster than someone starting on their own. So that's, how we were able to even add sites for like a month, which some folks wouldn't think would be cost effective. But for us, our thought is if those kids are going in on a Saturday to have an opportunity to study and can have, and they need to eat a meal, that's something we can do because we have the staff to do it. We have 4 offices in North Carolina, about 23 staff. We have about 465 facilities that we oversee, feeding about 16,000 kids. Now that is in family child care centers, YMs, YWs, school systems, and so the whole gamut. Maybe we need to go to the next slide. We essentially do the whole application and implementation process. We've got it streamlined. The whole purpose on our part is to make it smooth for the school system. They've got a lot of things to do. We have other things to do. We're going to audit paperwork every month and make sure that everybody's in compliance all the time, or maybe somebody doesn't get paid. But that way we always do know that everybody's in compliance when our office is audited. When we go out to our sites, sometimes we're taking 6 or 7 people because we want to be in all of the classrooms essentially at one time to be sure we get to see everybody actually have a meal. That may sound overwhelming, but as you said earlier, our staff is very friendly. They're going to go in and try not to disturb anybody, count heads, communicate with the principals. Maybe we have suggestions. Maybe there's a substitute in the classroom or a teacher. We can just sort of do some on-site technical assistance at any time. We also can provide additional staff training. A lot of our training is online, so it's easy to access. And the other thing is I ensure that our staff is well trained. So even if I have a turnover, that has absolutely not any impact on any of our facilities. So we love what we do. We've been doing it a long time. And our goal is to feed children also. And so this to me is a real exciting opportunity to be able to service an organization such as a school system that has children that may not go home to a meal. It makes all the difference.
It sure does. Thank you so much, Vicki, for that. And it's always so great to hear from both you and Jim, since you clearly love working together so much and really get the mission and purpose of this program. And Julia, clearly you're right there along with it, really understanding the need to serve kids and really go where they are. So I just love how both of these models, while so different, both clearly really illustrate this theme of going where the kids are. And yeah, Julie, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the difference that you see this model making and when you started doing this.
Yeah, so with this model, we're again seeing just a higher participation rate. So we're reaching out to our enrichment programs, our athletes, extracurricular programs, and just seeing if they would like to participate. And we've really received great feedback from teachers, coaches, club sponsors. You know, as we all know, many students are hungry by the time school lets out. You know, maybe they had early lunch that day, or, you know, whatever the reason may be. And I hear all the time from our teachers, you know, those who are leading study groups, any type of after school activity, that they're just so grateful to have the opportunity to feed their students for these after school activities to help maintain their focus, their concentration, and in turn, again, just to improve their academic and enrichment goals. So we're seeing a lot of great things coming out of this program.
Yeah, that's great. And Jim, I also wanted to just ask, what kind of participation levels are you seeing with this supper in the classroom model?
Well, you know, it's funny you say that. We can honestly say that we have 100% participation, and someone would say, well, how can you have 100% participation? It really, truly is 100% participation. Our goal is to provide a meal. We provide a meal to every child in the classroom. Each child takes a complete meal, and you know, there's enough time built in that after that bell is rung for them to eat that. But certainly, you know, we understand that kids might not like everything that's offered, and something along those lines. And so, but each child is given a meal that is there in the classroom. And the feedback we've had is that they're either eating the entire thing, or you know, to be honest with you, some of them are even putting it in their bag and taking it home when they're going home. And we prepared transportation for that, to let them know that this would be happening. And if they did see that there was an issue with anything on the bus, to let us know. We've not had a word about that. I meet with the transportation director on a monthly basis, and there's never been an issue. But there's more than enough time for them to consume the meal in the classroom, and then each child does get a meal. So that's where we're at.
All right, and since you mentioned timing a little bit, I was wondering if we could just jump to that. So Jim, can you give a little bit more detail about when
Sure.
your staff started rolling out to deliver and how long that whole process takes from start to finish?
Sure. So if you'll remember, I mentioned, you know, there may be a need to add some additional staff, and what we did, especially the pilot schools, is we devoted resources to that. We created a position that would come in around 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and that person's responsibility was to prepare the carts and to prepare the containers with the meal alongside the cook who was there for the dinner program. So that person's responsibility was to do that, make sure all the rosters were in the bags, and all the logistics that are involved in that. Then at the end of when the bell would ring, and as I mentioned, this is a little technical, but what I meant, as I mentioned, is I'll give you an example. Say the end of the school day was 3 o'clock. Well, in the state of North Carolina, you can either have a school year broken down by days, or it could be broken down by curriculum hours. Guilford County Schools was broken down by curriculum hours, and they far exceeded the amount of curriculum hours needed for the school year. So our principals had this flexibility to actually, you know, move that bell schedule back, give us enough time so that they could ring that bell, but yet still students were an excuse for the day. Now, parents had the option. They understood that if they wanted to come pick their students up at that time, they were more than welcome to, because the official school day was over. But buses weren't going to run until after at least the dinner program had a chance to be served. So that bell then would ring, but by that time, though, we'd already staged all the meals in the hallways, using our breakfast carts. So the staff that were there in the cafeteria would then take a hallway or an area of the school, and they would deliver the carts in the hallway. The teachers would then come out just like they did in breakfast, grab their cold and hot cooler that corresponded to the classroom, and they bring it in there, and then they'd serve the students. The thing about dinner is that they get all 5 components, so it's not an offer versus serve situation, so it made it a little easier for teachers. Then their responsibility is just to make sure that the roster matches up with the students, that if the student left early for the day, that the attendance roster reflected that, and those sort of things. So that's how that bell schedule worked. And the biggest thing, again, on that, one of the biggest things too with that was that principals need to make sure the teachers had some type of structured curriculum. It couldn't be a free-for-all, couldn't be recess. There had to be something of a tangible curriculum resource that students could access. Was it quiet reading time? Was it tutorial help? Was it help with homework? Was it group reading? We had Cone Elementary School where a few times during the month there would be someone over the loudspeaker who would read to the entire school, so they're all sharing the same book. So really creative people on that end making that happen. So I hope I didn't ramble, but I think I kind of got what you needed there.
No, thank you. So Julia, if I could circle back to you, could you provide a little bit more detail about when your staff gets those carts ready, when you start serving relative to the final bell time, and then how long that whole process takes?
Yeah, so, as I mentioned at the beginning of my slides there, we do have 14 schools who are participating in our suppers program. And our suppers are actually all produced in a central location, and it conveniently is our high school, which makes it easy for our mobile suppers cart. But our team will begin building those suppers early in the morning when they arrive for their shift. And when those are done, we have a district driver who will disperse the meals out to their respective schools. But the ones for our high school, of course, are made right there in the kitchen. So it makes it very easy for us to load up a cooler in our cart and hit the hallways as soon as that bell rings to dismiss the students in the afternoon there.
Great. And then how long does your service period last? Is it 10 minutes? Is it a half hour?
We have a wide open service period, but typically the kids here at the high school, when they learn that routine, they are quick. So, as soon as that bell rings, like I said, we'll have a lot of those students who are waiting for us outside the cafeteria. And for those who aren't, we're able to make a quick round in the hallway really before a lot of those extracurricular activities are taking place and hit all the students that we need to before they're, occupied with their studies or at their athletics. So really it's a quick round that we're making in the school, and it works extremely well for those students and teachers and coaches.
Great. And I guess building on what you said with when meal prep starts, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, just like how many hours per day you need and whether you were able to build in the supper prep time entirely to the existing staff members' times, or if you had to add any time.
Yeah, no, our staff, no additional time was needed to be added. They have more of a assembly line that fashion for the building of the supper. So it's really become an efficient process here. We have a great space in our dry storage area at the high school where we have a large table set up to create that necessary space to make these meals. So no extra time was needed to be added. It was all built in already into their normal shift, normal schedule. So I like to describe them as a well-oiled machine. They really can fire out the suppers meals really quick.
That's awesome. Jim, turning over to you, can you tell us a little bit more about what your staffing looks like for preparing the supper meals and how many people you need, how many hours, whether you needed new staff, et cetera?
Yeah, I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, we actually added a staff member at each of those schools, 4-hour employee, part-time employee, and at both schools we looked at, we added, I think it was a total of 1 extra hour a day to 1 other employee. So the investment that way was really not massive. As I mentioned, we tried to put a menu together that was pretty efficient. We utilized the folks that were already there, our cook that's already there. As she was winding down with lunch preparation, she could then jump in and start helping with the dinner preparation. And you always, as an administrator, you always get a little worried. Okay, we're going to add another program, but we're not going to, what's in it for me, sort of thing. But I think, to the credit of this team that I had in these 2 schools, especially, was that they recognized the importance of it. They saw that we were dedicating resources to it. They saw that the teachers were going to be part of it, that it wasn't going to be all on them. So I think just the knowledge and understanding that it was a collaborative effort in the whole building, and it wasn't just going to be an additional workload for them, really kind of helped motivate them, because my staff have always responded with the fact that they're glad to be part of it, they're proud to be part of it. They've been recognized by the district as being leaders as part of this, by the Board of Education. So any additional investment in their time, in their workload, was greatly outweighed by the benefits that they saw, and they recognized that they were making a real difference. So 4 hours at each place by an employee, an hour each a day for 1 additional employee, giving them an extra hour. That was it.
All right, that's great. Vicki, I'd love to have you just talk a little bit more about your monitoring and oversight process, and just how you make that work with your staff, and especially how you handle issues where you do see kids, taking meals home, which we know that they can't take a whole meal home. They can only take, 1, the traveling apple rule, they can only take 1 fruit, vegetable, or grain item home. So just how do you handle all of those issues that come up when you're trying to monitor an entire school eating at once?
Well, that is interesting, because when we go to a school that may have 25 to 30 classrooms, that's when I said we send maybe 6 or 7 people, because we can go in and out of a classroom pretty quickly, talking to a teacher, counting kids, and overseeing the service. But you can only do so much, in 20 minutes. Generally, what we have set up are what we call a share table. So the kids can't just necessarily pick up their whole meal, put it in their book bag, and head home. Sometimes, and that's a lot of times for sanitation reasons, but it's also just in the rule. So that's why we have spoken individually with any teacher that, they can take parts of a meal home that's on the share table. The other thing I thought was interesting, as we talked, and we all have sort of reiterated the bell, after the bell, and after the bell. And most of the time in schools, there is a bell. There may be a school system that doesn't have a bell system, but the reality of that is that you really do need to separate the day from the school day and the after school day. Because the CACFP has this as an after school program, it can't be a during the day program, which is different than with the school. When you have anytime you have a school system and you're doing something during the school day, that's coming under the school lunch program. And these 2 programs are separate. They have different rules, and, that's what gets a little complicated about it sometimes. So it is important that there's that delineation that this is after school, and that's why they went to the extra time and thought process to be sure that they that they planned that out, how they were going to do the bell. As far as the share tables are concerned, that has actually flowed very easily. We've not had any problems with that in any of our school systems. Maybe at first when someone didn't understand, the teacher, sometimes a substitute teacher might be a little caught off guard, but even that has flowed pretty well, because there's a system. And sometimes what we've also seen is the students will tell the substitute teacher, oh, this is when our dinner is coming and we get to do an activity. So, sometimes it might be an art activity, it might be a homework activity or homework assistance, but it just needs to be a real activity and something that works. And it actually can be a calming time at the end of the day for the kids who have had a busy day. They're getting ready to go home. They are hungry already. They might have eaten lunch at 11 o'clock, 10:30 or 11, and it seems to flow really pretty easily as long as they ring that bell, make that difference, eat in the classroom, and so much of that is the safety reasons. We don't want someone taking home a chicken salad sandwich that sits in their book bag for 4 days before they decide to eat it, or a sibling decides to eat it. So all those rules are there for a reason. But it's a constant reiteration because of staff changes in any school system. That happens, and so we try to go out frequently. And when the school year starts, we'll be out everywhere early, and quickly. And all of our visits are unannounced. So with that unannounced visit, we still want to be sort of in the background and not obtrusive, but present.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you're able to provide that extra level of support and technical assistance for all of those little nitty-gritty rules that we know exist about, congregate meals and eating on site and share tables and the whole 9 yards. And Julia, since I know we haven't really touched on this at all for you, I was wondering if you could speak to what that kind of administrative piece looks like for Pike Township schools and who handles that and just that end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as with everyone else, a piece that is so important to us is to remain compliant. And I handle all of the compliance pieces for our schools and their on-site reviews. So just as, as Vicki mentioned, I spend a significant amount of time out in each site throughout the school year, working collaboratively with our teams just to ensure that we're meticulous in compiling the necessary paperwork for our program and to continue to be successful. So really, we have an awesome staff here at Pike, and we work together on all of the compliance pieces of it. But I'm out there in those schools just, early on in the school year and continually throughout the school year, just checking in, making sure that they have everything that they need and that they're being compliant as well, so we can continue this program in compliance with all of the regulations.
Great, thank you. We know that's so important. And the former state agency employee in you was so grateful when you said to check it with your state agency contact first. I know that goes a long way towards making sure things go well with any state monitoring and audits down the line. Great. Well, we have gotten a ton of questions already from the audience, so I'm going to transition to start trying to answer some of those. You are welcome to continue submitting those questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can, and if necessary, we can follow up later and try to get answers if we don't get to everything. But we've gotten 2 questions about the specific kinds of foods that you serve. One person asked if all of the meals are cold, and someone else asked what are the most popular items. So Julia, why don't we start with you? Do you do cold meals exclusively, and what are your top items?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are doing cold meals exclusively. So, we serve a wide range of students all the way from pre-kindergarten to 12th grade. And there's absolutely no question that we have a wide variety of taste preferences as well to please. So we try to keep our menus varied, and we're always seeking feedback from our students through, word of mouth, surveys, just to find new options that we can serve or increase those fan favorite menu items whenever possible to help keep our participation strong throughout the school year. I would say some of our favorites, we have a pizza bagel and an Italian hero sandwich that go over really well with all of our students. And of course, our students love the strawberries and peaches that we serve as our fruit options in our meal as well.
That definitely sounds yummy, especially if they're in season like they are now. And Jim, do you want to talk about your meals? Are they cold, and what are favorite items?
We serve a variety of hot and cold. We'll alternate 3 and 2, and then 2 and 3, depending on the cycle of the year. And we use a collapsible cooler. It's cool. It's an insulated. It's almost like a large pizza. If you've ever gotten a pizza delivery at home, it's similar to that. So it's a padded insulated cooler that we use for our cold and our hot, because it keeps things just as cold as it would warm. So it helps in the transportation. It's funny that Julie mentioned that Italian Hero is one of our favorites for our cold meal, and we have a spicy Cajun spicy chicken sandwich that we don't have on our normal regular lunch menu, but we have exclusively for that dinner menu, just to kind of keep variety. That seems to be popular too. I mean, many people aren't surprised anymore, but our elementary kids really like spice. They like heat. So feedback we've always gotten was heat is okay and spicy is all right. So we try to tend to push that a little bit. Their palate is a little more sophisticated than we give them credit for at times. So, but those are just two popular items that I know of off the top of my head.
All right, great. We got a question about how you count and claim the meals and whether you have to keep track of that by child or not. So why don't we go in reverse order? Jim, if you want to start, what does that process look like of counting and claiming meals?
Sure. So the data manager, which is an office personnel for the school system, will run a report every morning that is it's an attendance roster. So we'll match that attendance roster up as best we can with our roster and our point of sale. A roster goes down. It's a weekly roster that goes. In our totes, there's an outside envelope that goes with the cart every week to the classroom. So the teacher is responsible for checking off to make sure, when a child is assigned a meal, provided a meal, and then that roster is then matched up by our cafeteria manager in an extension of our point of sale. Our vendor has created what's called Point of Sale Plus, which allows us to record our dinner meals as you would with us in the National School Lunch and the breakfast program. We record it through our point of sale, and then that data is tabulated here at the central office and helps us when we file the claim through Vicki. But then Vicki and her team, their job is to verify that our rosters match up to what we're claiming for accuracy, and so that we're not overclaiming.
Great. And Julia, what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, so we are using just that standard meal count sheet right off of our state website. So whenever we deliver a suppers or when we're pushing around our cart, we have our meal count sheet with us, and our staff are trained to complete that sheet and know exactly what students need to take for a reimbursable meal. So as students come up to get their meal, they are crossing off numbers on that meal count sheet, and those meal count sheets get consolidated by our staff here so that when we go to enter the claims again, we're making sure that we have the accurate information for that.
Great. And I'll just provide some, additional national context or what the options are. So for after-school meals, you do need some kind of attendance record, and you do need a meal count. You don't necessarily need to claim meals by child, because one of the benefits of the CACFP at-risk after-school meals program is that all children are eligible for free meals, and they're all reimbursed at the same free rate. So you don't have to track meals by a child, although obviously some of these systems that schools have can help with that process of just keeping track of all of those meals. One thing I want to go back to, someone asked, did I understand correctly that you allow students to take food home? So I'll just reiterate that students have to, eat their meal on site for it to be reimbursable. There is what's known as the traveling apple rule, that students may be allowed to take one component, fruit, vegetable, or grain, of their meal with them. And then as Vicki and Jim talked about, they also have share tables. So if kids don't want an item in their meal, they can put that on the share table. And so, students can take food off the share table as well. Is there anything any of you want to add to that?
No, I think that was well put, Carolyn.
Well done.
All right. Let's see. Goodness, I'm getting more questions that I can keep up with. Another person asked, does every state offer some version of the free supper program? And the answer to that is yes. The CACFP at-risk after-school meals program is available in all states. It may or may not be through the same agency that runs the school meals program. So as Vicki was saying, in North Carolina, that's a separate agency. But yes, this program is available across the country. Let's see, what else do we have to answer? Julia, do you ever have issues with kids leaving campus, and is there anything that you do to prevent that?
That is a great question. You know, at the beginning of the year, sometimes I think that it's easy to forget for parents, if they're coming to get their student, that they do need to eat that meal on site. So to prevent that, we remind our extracurricular and after-school staff of those guidelines and those rules that the students must eat it. You know, a lot of times we're reminding them, hey, we have an awesome program. We have an awesome opportunity for your kids to stay and eat a nutritious meal. If they need to absolutely leave, they, you know, can't stay. You know, unfortunately, you know, the best we could do is if they were to eat that meal on site, and as you said, Carolyn, do the traveling apple rule. But otherwise, we tell them, you know, it's a free meal for your child. It's a great opportunity if you'll give them a few moments to stay here and eat. So really, we don't get a whole lot of negative feedback on that. A lot of people are more than willing to say, oh yeah, well, you know, we've got a few minutes, no worries. So no, we really don't have too much of an issue with that, because most of our students will get those meals at the beginning of their program. So that way, you know, they'll stay for their program and eat and then continue on with their activities. So really not a huge issue here in our township.
Okay. And I also had another question that came in towards the beginning of the webinar for you, Julia. Do the meals go to students only? And do students have the option to come to the cafeteria, or is it only the delivery?
Great question. So we do have, you know, of course, we're feeding our students. They have the option at our schools that we disperse the menus, or the meals to. They are in the cafeteria most of the time, is where those extracurriculars are taking place. But otherwise, with the mobile suppers cart, it does begin in the cafeteria. So the starting location for it starts in the cafeteria. And as that line dies down, we start to move throughout the school to try and capture more students who maybe didn't have enough time to get to the cafeteria, or maybe didn't have enough time to wait in line before they had to get to their program. So we start in the cafeteria and then work our way around the school.
All right, great. We have a question for Jim. Someone I think is a little incredulous that all your teachers are on board with supper in the classroom. So they were just wondering how you got everyone to be so supportive, and if there was any particular messaging or training that really helped.
Well, okay, I'll tell you this way. When I talk to a principal, okay, and the principal is on board, and the principal tells me I'm gonna make sure all my staff's on board. That's where I go from that. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, or certainly not 100% of teachers. We're always gonna get. Look, I still get blowback every once in a while from a rogue teacher about breakfast in the classroom. I understand that, but I guess my thing is and look, anybody in my position, all the folks on the phone here know this. You know, you can't let things like that deter you. You know, you've got to put a plan in place. You've got to make sure that the plan has been well thought out and is pragmatic and strategic. And yeah, you're going to get naysayers. So, you know, maybe I was a little alerted when I said all of them, but I will tell you that those voices are very few and far between, and they're greatly outweighed by those that understand it. You know, it's really that principal relationship. You know, I ask my supervisors to have an open door and you know, collegial relationship with those. So, you know, once that's established and that principal is buying in, I trust them to be able to lead their staff and take care of that. That's what they're going to manage. I'm going to manage my team. They're going to manage their team. But as long as we're on the same page and the goal is the same, then that's really the most important thing for me.
And if I can add to that, Jim, can you hear me, Carolyn? If I can add to that, I think that we have also found when our staff goes into the classroom, early on, we had some teachers that were kind of like, well, this is a little bit troublesome. But they've changed their attitude since they've seen that they have some children that stay in school all day now that might have at some point decided they wanted to go home early and call their parents or something, that they're staying in the classroom because they want to eat that extra meal. And the other thing we do is we make it a point to tell the staff what a good job they're doing, because we're out there, coming in an unannounced type of basis and saying, you've done a great job in your classroom and thank you. I know your kids appreciate it. So they're getting it from different areas too. And we know the parents are really excited. I mean, I'm a parent, and boy, I would have loved it if my kids had a meal before they came home.
And Carolyn, these, since these schools are breakfast in the classroom schools, most of the school administrators and teachers have a confidence level in this because they've seen what breakfast in the classroom is. When we brought them breakfast in the classroom, we talked about how it was going to help with truancy. It was going to help eliminate problems in the hallway. It was going to help with the tardiness issue. It was going to help with behavior. It was going to help with attention in the classroom in the morning. And they saw those results, basically overnight. That builds a confidence level and a trust level in them. So that gives us cachet when we come to them with a new program and say, we'd like to do this because, we've delivered results before. And that's why I think I used that in the slide, that based on the growth and the success of the breakfast in the classroom program, this has just been a natural transition. So I think we've convinced folks that, we know, we're doing what's in the best interest, and there are going to be tangible results.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we have burned through this hour so quickly, and I feel like we could just keep on talking for another hour. There's so much to learn from you and all the work you've done. But out of respect for your time and all of our attendees, we're going to wrap it up here, and we will do our best to follow up with all of the questions that we weren't able to get to after the webinar. So do be on the lookout for that follow-up email, and we also have some other resources that may help you and help to answer some of those unanswered questions. So this is our website and the web page for after school meals specifically. So you can visit that. We've got all of our resources there. If you want to learn more about the umbrella model, we have a great handout and a report brief. I think that'll answer one of the questions we got about how do you get the learning activity in, so fast at the end of the day. And the umbrella model talks about how as long as you have the option for those activities, you don't have to guarantee that every child really did participate in that activity. So if there are, a couple of students that do decide they need to go for the day, they can do that. You don't have to follow them to their activity, but there do have to be those activities offered and available and open to all. So you can look up more about the umbrella model to learn more about how that works and fits with regulations. We also have a supper in the classroom handout and report brief if you want to learn more about our work on that. If you need more background on the after school meals program or want to learn more about our pilot projects on the umbrella model and supper in the classroom, we have 2 webinar recordings that you can look up. We have some other resources on our website, 3 meals a day, a win-win-win to help get started with after school meals program, a sample customizable postcard that you can use to help promote your program, and some other FAQs for things that we've gotten in the past. So with that, we will wrap up this webinar, and I just want to thank Julia, Jim, and Vicki again for your time today and sharing all of your expertise and experience on implementing these programs. It's been great to talk with you, and clearly everyone's been learning a lot and has been really engaged. So thank you to everyone who's been listening and submitting your questions. We really appreciate it, and we hope you will join us again in the future and keep in touch via our email listserv. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Carolyn.